Rain tapped relentlessly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of one of Seoul's tallest buildings as a small pair of footsteps echoed through the silent hallway. Every employee inside the powerful headquarters froze when they saw a beautiful African woman walking toward the private office at the end of the corridor. Beside her was a little boy, no older than 5, holding her hand with innocent confidence. The secretary rushed forward, trying to stop her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You can't just walk in there." The little boy looked up with bright eyes and asked softly, "Is my daddy inside?" Those simple words drained every color from the secretary's face. Before anyone could react, the office door slowly opened. Standing there was the man whose name alone made billionaires nervous. Tall, impeccably dressed, and carrying an icy expression that never revealed emotion. He ruled one of Korea's most powerful business empires while secretly controlling an organization feared throughout the country's elite circles. His sharp eyes landed on the woman he hadn't seen in 5 years. The woman he had buried in his heart. For one endless moment, neither of them spoke. Then his gaze shifted downward. The little boy smiled. The child had his eyes. The same smile. The same tiny dimple that had once made countless magazine covers call him Korea's most handsome billionaire. The boy looked up innocently and whispered, "Are you my father?" The room fell completely silent. What happened next would uncover a secret buried for 5 painful years. But before we continue, if you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to @Physial_threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. 5 years earlier, long before heartbreak became part of his life, Kang Joon-ho was known as the untouchable king of Seoul's elite. At only 30 years old, he had built a business empire that stretched across luxury hotels, technology companies, real estate, and international investments. Behind the polished image the public admired was another reality known only to a trusted few. He had inherited leadership of a powerful mafia family after the sudden passing of his father. Although feared by enemies, Joon-ho never enjoyed violence or intimidation. His greatest dream was surprisingly ordinary. He wanted peace. He wanted someone who loved the man beneath the expensive suits instead of the fortune attached to his name. Unfortunately, every woman introduced by influential families seemed more interested in becoming Mrs. Kang than in knowing the quiet, lonely man behind the title. His grandmother constantly reminded him that marriage was part of his duty. "The future of this family depends on you." But Joon-ho always answered with the same calm voice. "I won't marry for business." Those words frustrated everyone around him. What none of them knew was that destiny had already begun writing another story. Far away from Seoul's wealthy districts lived a young African woman named Saad. Unlike many foreigners chasing glamorous careers, Saad had arrived in Korea with little more than determination and hope. She came from Ghana, carrying memories of a loving grandmother who had taught her one lesson she never forgot. Never let hardship make your heart hard. Those words became her strength. She worked long hours at a neighborhood cafe during the day and spent evenings studying Korean while taking online classes to improve her future. Life wasn't easy. There were days she counted every coin before buying dinner. Still, she smiled. Customers remembered her kindness more than the coffee she served. One cold winter evening, everything changed. The cafe was unusually quiet because of heavy snowfall. Near closing time, a man entered wearing a black coat and simple clothes. No luxury watch. No bodyguards. No expensive car waiting outside. Just a tired man asking politely for hot coffee. Saad noticed something immediately. He looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. As she placed the warm drink before him, she smiled gently. "You look like someone carrying the whole world." Joon-ho looked up in surprise. Most people either feared him or tried to impress him. She did neither. Instead, she treated him like any ordinary customer. He almost smiled. "Is it that obvious?" She laughed softly. "Only to someone who has also carried heavy things." That unexpected conversation lasted only 10 minutes. But somehow, it became the beginning of everything. The following week, he returned. Then again, and again. Soon, stopping by the little cafe became part of his daily routine. Sometimes he ordered coffee. Sometimes tea. Sometimes nothing at all. He simply sat by the window while Saad worked, and they talked whenever the cafe became quiet. She never asked about his money. She never searched his name online. She never treated him differently. For the first time in years, Kang Joon-ho felt completely relaxed. Meanwhile, Saad slowly realized there was something mysterious about the quiet customer. Luxury cars occasionally appeared across the street. Men in dark suits watched from a distance. People secretly bowed when he walked through certain neighborhoods. Still, he never explained. She never asked. One spring afternoon, while cherry blossoms danced through the air, Junho finally invited her to dinner. It wasn't at an expensive restaurant. Instead, they walked through a peaceful riverside market, eating street food and laughing over small things. Saad teased him after he accidentally dropped spicy rice cake sauce onto his white shirt. "You definitely don't look like someone who cooks." He laughed. "I almost burned water once." She burst into laughter so loudly that nearby couples turned to look. That sound stayed with him for days. Weeks turned into months. Friendship slowly became love. Without realizing it, they became each other's safest place. One evening, as they watched the Han River reflecting thousands of city lights, Junho finally decided to tell her everything. "I haven't been honest." Saad looked at him calmly. "I know." His eyes widened. "You know?" She nodded. "I don't know exactly who you are, but I know you're hiding something." He took a deep breath. "My family controls one of Korea's most powerful organizations." Silence followed. He expected fear. He expected rejection. Instead, Saad reached for his hand. "You've never frightened me." He stared at her. "What matters isn't your family's name." She smiled warmly. "It's the man sitting beside me." For the first time in years, Kang Jun-ho felt tears threatening to appear. Nobody had ever accepted him so completely. From that night forward, he stopped hiding. He introduced her to parts of his world, not the dangerous side, but the businesses, the charities, and the dreams he hoped would someday replace the family's dark reputation. Saad admired how much good he quietly did without seeking recognition. She often told him, "The strongest people are the ones who choose kindness even when life gives them power to be cruel." Those words remained engraved in his heart. Months later, their relationship became impossible to hide. His closest assistant noticed the change first. His boss smiled more. He worked fewer late nights. He laughed. Even the employees whispered that the cold CO looked happier. But happiness rarely goes unnoticed. Inside the Kang family mansion, rumors began spreading. The future heir had fallen in love. Not with the daughter of a wealthy family. Not with a celebrity. Not with a politician's granddaughter. But with an ordinary African woman. Some relatives considered it an embarrassment. Others saw it as a threat to their influence. His grandmother remained silent. His uncle, however, was far less forgiving. This relationship must end. Junho ignored every warning. Instead, he secretly visited one of Seoul's finest jewelers. After spending nearly 2 hours choosing the perfect ring, he finally smiled with satisfaction. It wasn't the largest diamond. It wasn't the most expensive. It was the one that reminded him of Sada's gentle heart. He planned everything carefully. Their anniversary dinner. A quiet rooftop garden overlooking Seoul. A violin quartet. Her favorite white lilies. He imagined the moment she would say yes. He had never been more certain of anything in his life. But while he prepared for the happiest night of his future, someone else was preparing to destroy it. Unknown to Junho, members of his own family had already begun watching Saad. Every cafe shift, every bus ride, every evening class. They quietly learned about the people she loved most, especially the grandmother back in Ghana who had raised her. And one afternoon, just days before the proposal, a black luxury car stopped beside Saad after work. The window slowly rolled down. Inside sat one of the most influential members of the Kang family. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a warning that made her heartbeat slow. "We need to talk." Saad hesitated. Deep inside, she felt that accepting this invitation would change her life forever, and she had no idea just how heartbreaking that change would become. The luxurious black sedan glided silently through the streets of Seoul before stopping in front of an elegant private tea house tucked away from the city's busy crowds. Saad stepped out of the car with an uneasy feeling she could not explain. Everything about the invitation felt carefully planned. The place was quiet. Too quiet. An elderly woman was already seated inside the private room. Her posture was graceful, her silver hair perfectly arranged, and every movement reflected years of authority. She didn't need to introduce herself. Saad immediately knew who she was. This was Kang Jun-ho's grandmother, the woman everyone in Korea's elite respected and feared. "Please," the older woman said calmly. "Sit down." Saad politely bowed before taking her seat. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The silence itself felt like a conversation. Finally, the older woman poured tea into two delicate cups before looking directly into Sada's eyes. I understand why my grandson loves you. Sada remained respectful. Thank you. You are kind. Another pause. You are intelligent. Sada simply nodded. And perhaps that is exactly why you already know this relationship has no future. Those words landed heavily between them. Sada looked down at her untouched cup. I love him. The older woman's expression softened for the first time. I believe you. That unexpected response caught Sada by surprise. She had prepared herself to be insulted. Instead, she was met with quiet honesty. But love, the older woman continued, does not erase reality. She slowly placed a small envelope on the table. Inside were photographs, not of Junho, of Sada's grandmother in Ghana, her childhood home, her cousins, even the small school where neighborhood children gathered every morning. Sada's breathing became uneven. What is this? The elderly woman answered calmly. Our family has many eyes. Fear slowly spread across Sada's face. I don't understand. You don't have to. The older woman's voice remained gentle, but every word carried unbearable weight. My grandson has countless enemies. Every person he loves becomes a target. She leaned forward slightly. If you marry him, your family will spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. Sada felt her hands begin to tremble. The older woman wasn't shouting. She wasn't threatening. She simply spoke as though explaining an unavoidable truth. You are a good woman, she continued. Good women deserve peaceful lives. Sada whispered, we can leave Korea. The older woman slowly shook her head. You still don't understand how powerful our enemies are. Silence returned. Then came the sentence that shattered Sada's heart. If you truly love Kang Junho, let him go. Tears immediately filled her eyes. I can't. You must. The older woman looked toward the window overlooking Seoul. He will hate you. Sada closed her eyes. I know. He will believe you stopped loving him. More tears escaped. I know. But one day, he will survive the pain and become the leader this family expects. Sada's voice cracked. And what about me? For the first time, the older woman looked genuinely saddened. You will carry the burden alone. Those words echoed inside Sada long after the meeting ended. She returned to her apartment, unable to breathe properly. Everything she had dreamed about suddenly felt impossible. She remembered Junho's smile, his quiet laugh, the way he looked at her as though she was the safest place in the world. She cried until sunrise. Meanwhile, Junho was completely unaware of what had happened. He spent the next 2 days making final preparations for the proposal. Every flower was carefully chosen. Every detail reflected something she loved. He even practiced his proposal several times, laughing at himself whenever he became nervous. His assistant smiled. I've never seen you this happy. Junho admitted quietly. I think she's the person I've been waiting for my entire life. What he didn't know was that, at the very same moment, Sada had made the most painful decision of her life. She sat alone inside her apartment with a blank sheet of paper. She tried writing the truth. Then she tore it apart. She tried explaining everything. She tore that page too. If she revealed what had happened, Junho would never stop fighting for her. He would confront his family. His enemies would notice. The danger his grandmother warned about would become real. She couldn't allow that. Hours passed before she finally wrote only one sentence. Please don't look for me. Nothing more. No explanation. No goodbye. Just 7 heartbreaking words. She folded the note carefully. Then she quietly packed her belongings. When the taxi pulled away from her apartment before sunrise, she looked back only once. Her tears blurred the city she had come to love. By evening, she was gone. That same night, Junho arrived at the rooftop garden carrying the engagement ring. The violinists were already waiting. White lilies surrounded the beautifully decorated table. Candles flickered beneath the evening sky. He smiled as he checked his watch. She was usually punctual. 10 minutes passed. Then 30. An hour. His smile slowly disappeared. He called her phone. No answer. Again. Nothing. By midnight, concern had become panic. He rushed to her apartment. The landlord opened the door. She left this morning. Junho froze. What? She moved out. No. The landlord handed him a small folded note. His hands shook as he opened it. Please don't look for me. That was all. He read it again. And again. And again. Surely there had to be another page. Another explanation. There wasn't. The engagement ring slipped from his trembling hand onto the floor. For the first time since becoming head of the Kong family, Kong Joon-ho broke down completely. For weeks he searched. He used every resource available. Private investigators, international contacts, immigration records. Nothing. It was as though Saad had disappeared from the world. His family pretended to know nothing. Even his grandmother remained silent. Months turned into years. Eventually, everyone told him the same thing. Move on. He couldn't. He buried himself in work instead. His companies expanded across Asia. His influence became even greater. The once warm man became colder than ever. Employees feared speaking unnecessarily around him. The smile Saad loved disappeared completely. 5 long years passed. Far away, Saad had built a simple life. She now lived in a quiet coastal town, raising a cheerful little boy named Malik. Life was far from luxurious. She worked as a translator and language tutor while taking freelance jobs late into the night. Some months were difficult, but every evening, Malik wrapped his tiny arms around her and reminded her why she had made her sacrifice. He had inherited his mother's gentle heart, but every day, he looked more like his father. His sharp eyes, his smile, even the way he tilted his head while thinking. Sometimes Saad caught herself staring at him for too long. Each glance reminded her of the man she had never stopped loving. She never spoke badly about Joon-ho. Whenever Malik asked about his father, she smiled gently. He is a very good man. Does he know me? Her smile faded slightly. No. Why? She struggled to answer. The time wasn't right. Malik accepted that answer for years. Until one rainy afternoon. His kindergarten class celebrated Family Day. Children proudly introduced both parents. Some arrived with grandparents. Others with older siblings. Malik happily stood beside his mother. When another child innocently asked, "Where's your dad?" he didn't know what to say. That evening he sat quietly by the window. Saad noticed immediately. What's wrong? He hesitated before asking the question she had feared for years. Mom. Yes. Does my daddy not love me? Her heart shattered. She quickly pulled him into her arms. No. Then why has he never come? Tears filled her eyes. Because he doesn't know you exist. Malik looked up in confusion. Can we tell him? For several seconds, Saad couldn't speak. Everything she had sacrificed. Every painful year. Every lonely birthday. Every silent tear. Suddenly stood before her in the form of one innocent question. I just want to meet him once, Malik whispered. If he's kind like you say, I want him to know I love him. That night, Saad didn't sleep. She looked at an old photograph she had hidden for 5 years. Joon-ho was smiling beside her beneath cherry blossoms. She gently touched the picture. I'm sorry. The next morning, she made the decision she had spent 5 years avoiding. She booked 2 plane tickets to Seoul. Not to ask for money. Not to reclaim a place in his luxurious life. Not to reopen old wounds. She was returning for one reason only. A little boy deserved to know his father. What she didn't know was that the moment Joon-ho saw her again, the truth he had spent 5 years searching for would finally begin to reveal itself, and nothing in either of their lives would ever be the same again. The elevator doors slid open onto the top floor of Kong Group headquarters. Every employee watched in stunned silence as Saad stepped into the hallway with Malik holding her hand. 5 years had changed almost everything. She no longer looked like the young woman who had struggled to make ends meet while working at a neighborhood cafe. There was a quiet confidence in the way she walked now. Life had left invisible scars on her heart, but it had also given her remarkable strength. Beside her, Malik looked around with wide, curious eyes. So this is where Daddy works? Saad forced a small smile. Yes. Before she could take another step, the chief secretary hurried toward her. I'm sorry, ma'am. President Kong isn't seeing anyone today. Malik tugged gently on his mother's sleeve. It's okay, Mommy. Then he looked at the secretary with innocent sincerity. I just want to meet my dad. Those words echoed across the hallway. Several employees exchanged confused glances. The secretary's eyes widened. Your father? Before anyone could respond, the office door slowly opened. Kong Joon-ho stood there. His sharp eyes first landed on Saad. Time seemed to stop. For 5 long years, he had imagined this moment thousands of times. Sometimes he dreamed she would apologize. Sometimes he imagined himself walking away. Sometimes he imagined asking why. But now that she was standing before him, every prepared word disappeared. Neither of them spoke. Then his eyes slowly moved toward the little boy. The child smiled politely. Hello. Junho couldn't breathe. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The same dark eyes. The same calm expression. Even the way the boy stood reminded him of photographs from his own childhood. His heart pounded painfully. The little boy looked directly at him. Are you Kong Junho? His voice came out almost as a whisper. Yes. Malik smiled brightly. My mommy says you're my father. Silence consumed the room. The secretary quietly closed the office doors, leaving the three of them alone. Junho looked at Saad. His voice trembled. Is he telling the truth? Tears gathered in her eyes. She slowly nodded. Yes. The single word shattered every wall around his heart. He looked at the child again. 5 years. 5 birthdays. 5 Christmas mornings. 5 first steps. 5 years of bedtime stories. 5 years. Gone forever. His legs suddenly felt weak. He slowly sat down in the nearest chair without taking his eyes off Malik. The little boy walked closer with innocent curiosity. You look like me. Junho laughed through tears he could no longer hide. No. He whispered softly. You look like me. Malik smiled proudly. My teacher says I got my smile from my dad. Junho covered his face. His shoulders shook. For years he had convinced himself that Saad simply stopped loving him. He had never imagined another possibility. Saad quietly stood there, watching the man she had loved break under the weight of the truth. Several minutes passed before Junho finally managed to speak. Can I? He looked toward Malik. Can I hug you? The little boy looked at his mother. Saad nodded gently. Malik immediately walked into Junho's arms. The moment their embrace happened, something inside Junho healed. He held his son carefully, as though afraid the child might disappear if he let go. Malik giggled. Daddy, you're squeezing me. Junho quickly loosened his embrace. I'm sorry. It's okay. The little boy wrapped his tiny arms around his father's neck. I've wanted to meet you for a long time. Those words pierced Junho's heart. He looked at Saad. Why? His voice wasn't angry. It was broken. Why didn't you tell me? Saad lowered her eyes. I couldn't. You couldn't, or you wouldn't? She quietly reached into her handbag. Inside was a worn envelope she had carried for years. She handed it to him. I wanted you to read this. Junho slowly opened it. Inside was another letter. Not the short note she had left behind. This one was several pages long. His hands trembled as he began reading. My dearest Junho, if you're reading this, then life has finally allowed the truth to find you. I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. The note I left behind was the biggest lie I have ever told. Your grandmother came to see me before you proposed. She showed me photographs of my family. She reminded me that loving you meant placing everyone I loved in danger. She never threatened me directly. She simply showed me the reality of your world. I knew that if I told you the truth, you would fight for me. And if you fought, people would get hurt. I couldn't allow that. Then I discovered I was carrying our child. At first I wanted to tell you immediately. But every time I imagined your face, I also imagined the enemies waiting for any weakness. I chose to disappear. Not because I stopped loving you. Because I loved you too much. By the time he reached the last page, his vision had become blurry with tears. He looked up. You wrote this 5 years ago? She nodded. I could never send it. Why? Because if I had. She smiled sadly. You would have found me. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Junho whispered something that surprised even himself. I'm sorry. Saad looked confused. You have nothing to apologize for. I do. He stood slowly. I should have protected you better. She gently shook her head. You didn't even know. No. His voice cracked. But I should have created a world where you never had to make that choice. Malik looked between them with innocent confusion. Are you two crying because you're happy? Both parents laughed through their tears. Saad knelt beside him. Sometimes happiness and sadness arrive together. The little boy thought carefully before nodding. I think I understand. His innocent answer filled the office with warmth. The tension that had existed only minutes earlier slowly disappeared. For the first time in years, they sat together. Not as strangers, not as enemies, but as 3 people connected by love that had survived time. Junho spent the afternoon asking Malik endless questions. What do you like to eat? Noodles. What's your favorite subject? Science. What do you want to become when you grow up? Malik smiled proudly. I want to help people. Junho looked at Saad. He sounds exactly like you. She laughed softly. He also refuses to admit when he's tired. Junho smiled. That part definitely comes from me. Hours passed almost unnoticed. It felt as though they were trying to make up for 5 lost years in one afternoon. As evening approached, Malik became sleepy. Junho quietly carried him to the sofa and covered him with his own suit jacket. Father and son looked almost identical as they slept. Saad watched them silently. For years she had imagined this scene. She had dreamed about the day Malik would finally meet his father. Seeing them together made every sacrifice worthwhile. Junho walked back after gently checking on Malik. He looked directly into Saada's eyes. "There is one thing I need to know." She nodded. "What is it? Did you ever stop loving me?" Without hesitation. "No." He closed his eyes briefly. "I didn't stop either." Another silence settled between them. This one wasn't painful. It was peaceful. The kind of silence shared between two hearts that finally understood each other again. Junho reached into his desk drawer. Inside was a small velvet box. He had never thrown it away. He placed it gently on the desk. "The ring," Saad whispered. "I couldn't let it go." She carefully opened the box. The diamond still sparkled exactly as it had 5 years earlier. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You kept it." "I kept hope." He smiled sadly. "I just didn't know Hope would walk back into my office holding our son." Saad laughed softly through her tears. At that moment, both of them realized something extraordinary. The years they had lost could never be replaced. But the years ahead, those still belonged to them. Neither of them noticed that, elsewhere in the Kong family mansion, Junho's grandmother had just received the news that Saad had returned. She quietly closed her eyes. After 5 years of carrying her own silent regret, she knew the time had finally come to tell her grandson everything she had hidden. And that conversation would change their family's future forever. The following morning, the first rays of sunlight spread across Seoul, painting the city in shades of gold. For the first time in 5 years, Kang Junho woke up with something he thought he had lost forever: hope. He stood in front of the large window inside his penthouse, holding a framed photograph that had remained on his bookshelf all these years. It was the only picture he had of Saad, taken beneath the cherry blossoms during one of the happiest days of their lives. For years, he had looked at that picture with questions. Now, he looked at it with gratitude. She had never stopped loving him. She had never betrayed him. Everything he believed about those painful 5 years had been wrong. Meanwhile, in a nearby hotel, Saad was helping Malik get dressed. The little boy couldn't stop smiling. "Mom." "Yes." "Can I see Dad again today?" She smiled warmly. "I think he'd be very disappointed if you didn't." Malik laughed happily before running toward the breakfast table. Watching him filled Saada's heart with peace. She had spent years wondering whether she had made the right decision. Seeing the joy on her son's face answered every question. Sometimes, love meant making impossible choices. But sometimes, love also gave people a second chance. Just after breakfast, a black luxury car arrived outside the hotel. It wasn't sent by security. It wasn't part of the Kong family's formal protocol. Junho had driven there himself. When Malik spotted him through the window, he ran outside before his mother could stop him. "Daddy." Junho knelt with open arms. The little boy jumped into his embrace without hesitation. "I missed you." Junho laughed softly. "We only said goodbye last night." "I know." Malik grinned. "But I've got 5 years to make up for." Those innocent words made both adults emotional. Junho gently ruffled his son's hair. "I think we can manage that." He looked toward Saad. "Would the two of you spend the day with me?" She nodded. "I'd like that." Instead of taking them to expensive restaurants or luxury shopping districts, Junho chose the places that had once belonged to their love story. They visited the little riverside market where they had shared spicy rice cakes. The elderly vendor recognized him immediately. "You finally came back." Then she looked at Saad. "And you brought the young lady." Before either of them could explain, Malik proudly announced, "And I'm their son." The old woman burst into laughter. "I knew you two were meant for each other." The three of them spent the day walking through familiar streets, sharing simple meals, feeding birds along the Han River, and laughing over stories that had once been buried beneath years of sadness. It didn't feel like strangers reconnecting. It felt like a family finding its way home. But one conversation still remained. That evening, Junho returned to the Kong family mansion. His grandmother was waiting for him in the garden. She seemed older than he remembered, more fragile, as though the passing years had carried their own quiet burden. Without saying a word, Junho sat beside her. Several minutes passed in silence. Finally, she spoke. "You know everything." He nodded slowly. "I know enough." She looked down at her hands. "I was wrong." Those 4 words surprised him. His grandmother had never apologized to anyone before. I believed I was protecting our family. Her voice trembled. But I forgot something. She looked directly into his eyes. A family without love isn't worth protecting. Junho remained silent. I asked her to leave. I know. I believed distance would keep both of you safe. She wiped away a tear. I never imagined it would cost you 5 years of happiness. Junho gently reached for her hand. For years he had blamed her. Now he simply saw an elderly woman carrying regret. You made a mistake. She nodded. The biggest of my life. But mistakes don't have to become the end of a family. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Can you forgive me? He smiled sadly. I already have. The older woman quietly cried. For the first time in many years. The walls around the Kong family finally began to fall. A few days later, she asked to meet Saad. This time, there were no hidden intentions. No warnings. No impossible choices. Only honesty. When Saad entered the garden with Malik, the elderly woman slowly stood. She bowed deeply. I owe you an apology. Saad immediately looked uncomfortable. You don't have to. I do. The older woman interrupted gently. I judged you by your background instead of your heart. She smiled sadly. You loved my grandson more selflessly than anyone else ever could. Saada's eyes filled with tears. I never hated you. I know. The older woman looked toward Malik. And because of your courage. She smiled warmly. I have the privilege of meeting my great-grandson. Malik walked closer. Are you Daddy's grandma? She laughed softly. I am. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small chocolate he had been saving. You can have this. The elderly woman stared at the tiny gift before accepting it with trembling hands. No expensive treasure she had ever received carried as much meaning as that simple piece of chocolate. Children had a remarkable way of healing hearts adults had complicated. Weeks turned into months. The family slowly began creating new memories instead of mourning old ones. Junho adjusted his busy schedule so he could spend every evening with Malik. They built toy airplanes together, played soccer in the garden, read bedtime stories, learned how to make pancakes, although they burned the first few attempts badly. Each ordinary moment felt extraordinary because they had almost never happened. One evening, Malik asked the question that made everyone laugh. Daddy, yes. If you and Mommy loved each other all this time. Junho smiled. We did. Then why aren't you married? Saad nearly dropped her teacup. Junho chuckled. I've been wondering the same thing. Malik looked between them. I think you should fix that. Several weeks later, Junho invited Saad back to the rooftop garden where everything had almost ended 5 years earlier. This time, there was no orchestra, no elaborate decorations, no crowd, only white lilies, the city lights, and the family they had created together. Malik stood nearby holding a small ring box almost as carefully as if it were made of glass. Junho looked into Saada's eyes. 5 years earlier, he had prepared a perfect speech. Now, he spoke from his heart. I spent years believing I had lost the woman I loved. He smiled gently. The truth is, you were protecting me all along. Saad wiped away tears. You never left my heart. He took the ring from Malik. This ring has waited 5 years. He slowly knelt. Saad. His voice trembled. Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for the years we lost? She laughed through happy tears. You don't have to make up for them. She reached for his hand. We'll simply make the years ahead so beautiful that they heal the ones behind us. Then she smiled. Yes. The moment he placed the ring on her finger, Malik clapped so loudly that everyone laughed. I knew she'd say yes. The city skyline sparkled behind them as the three embraced. Not because life had been perfect, but because love had endured everything life had placed in its path. Several months later, they were married in an intimate ceremony attended by close friends, loyal employees, and family members who had learned that true strength had nothing to do with wealth, power, or status. It came from forgiveness, from sacrifice, from choosing love, even after heartbreak. Years later, visitors to Kong Group often noticed something unusual. The once feared CEO was no longer known for his cold expression. Instead, employees smiled whenever they saw a little boy running through the lobby shouting, Dad, and not far behind, a beautiful woman whose kindness had quietly transformed one of Korea's most powerful families forever. Some people believed love was measured by how long two people stayed together. But Junho and Saad proved something even greater. Sometimes, Love is measured by what two people are willing to sacrifice for each other. Sometimes, true love waits. Sometimes, it forgives. And sometimes, it finds its way home exactly when the time is right. Love is not defined by status, wealth, or power. Real love is built on sacrifice, trust, patience, forgiveness, and the courage to choose each other even after years of misunderstanding. When people replace pride with honesty and resentment with compassion, even broken hearts can become whole again. The greatest victories are not won through power, but through kindness, healing, and unconditional love. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from, and comment your favorite moment below, like this video, and subscribe to @Physial_Threads for more emotional Mafia love stories.